Boom. I got it. It worked.
It did work.
I got it right there. So today, hey, it's Scherzer
Schnetty.
and we're back with the war itself, which we're not going to spend too much time on. We're going to focus on turning points. If you want more war stuff, there's every video game ever made, every History Channel thing before the aliens, and literally about 26% of the books in the Library of Congress.
Yeah, pretty much.
If you are interested, because I know there are some of you guys that are like, are they going to talk about the kind of caliber of bullet of this battle?
No.
No. What we're going to do is we're going to do the thing that the AP tests want you to know is how did these battles and these turning points change our standings at the conferences? Because I'm going to tell you the truth. The conferences like always confused me.
Yeah, I like the conferences, but I'm a foreign policy person, and it sets up. My students will know this. It sets up things that are going to happen, and I like to make those connections, and that's what all these conferences do. But you got to win the battles first before you can have a conference.
Absolutely, and I'm more of a,
Well, you don't have to, because apparently we were having secret conferences before. Oh, I don't know. The U.S. got involved into the war.
so we're going to talk about that as well. I'm more of a socioeconomic guy. I believe that everything comes from socioeconomic factors. And the problem is, real quick, when you look at your lens of history, like Schneidy looks at it from foreign policy, I look at it from socioeconomic. You can make enough answers to like support your cause.
Yes.
We can always do that, and that's the fun thing about history is it's knock down, drag out, no matter what. And it's whoever side is prevailing at the time. But yeah, let's talk about the war that wasn't a war. Let's talk about America and the war that wasn't really happening.
Buying into the British propaganda.
Yeah, buying into the British. Okay, that was World War One, and
I would argue they started here.
Dunkirk
too.
is not British
No,
propaganda.
not Dunkirk, no. But the fact that Churchill can convince the United States to get involved in the war and not actually get involved in the war to make it look like they're involved. Lend-Lease Act, Atlantic Charter, that's the United States getting involved and basically like the little kid trying to get into the pool and it's kind of cold and sticking their foot in going, I don't know if I really want to be here, but I do have to kind of maybe perhaps help my friends. And Churchill and them taking advantage of that.
So it's a kid putting his toe into the cold pool while his friend is drowning.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know
Not
if I want to
exactly
jump in.
want to help you quite yet.
That's a
But
horrible-
if you can buy our stuff and come over and pick it up, like the Little Caesars hot and ready pizzas, right? You can come buy all the weapons you want and take it away all you want to, because we're not going to deliver it to you, right? It's Little Caesars hot and ready, Lend-Lease style, U.S. version.
We've got it. We've got the title for this episode is The Hot and Ready War.
But think about it, isn't that not it? Because that's what we're doing. We're re-kicking our economy in the United States quietly by building weapons of war for the Europeans to kill each other with. And the Europeans are okay with that.
Well, here's the thing about America. We're so resource rich and so economically powerful when we get there. We're supplying not just the Brits, we're 30 countries and ourselves, and we're not breaking a sweat.
Yeah.
We're having a grand old time.
But we're supposed to be isolationists, and we're not going to tell you why the economy is improving in 38. Just know that it is. But we're kind of getting ready to go to war. And don't worry about that conscription bill working through the U.S. Congress right now. It's just precautionary, just in case.
So that goes back to our first problem, which was, is World War II inevitable? Well, after we start doing that to build ourselves out of this problem, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
You're gonna get so let's talk about America's dirty little secret. We're seeing somebody on the side.
Yeah.
We're seeing Churchill because he's dash cunning and dash clever. I'm gonna show you guys Churchill once again just to see if I can do that real quick. Oh, there he is. That man on the right. That man seduced us.
Yes, that's the man that got U.S. involved in war without having into coming over.
Because he's one of us.
Yeah.
His mom was a New Yorker.
Yeah, and he almost died in a car crash in New York City. So there you go with that one.
Oh yeah, we're not in that universe. That's a different universe.
That is okay.
That's a weirder, different universe.
That's a different multiverse.
That's a different multiverse.
I apologize. Anyway, but the Atlantic Charter.
Let's talk about the Atlantic Charter.
Right, we're
real quick. Let's say what the Atlantic Charter is.
It sets up the goals for the war that the U.S. is not involved with yet.
So
this is our objective of the war that the U.S. won't get involved into for another what? Year and a half. right?
Year
Because
and a
it's
half.
40, right?
So
Yeah.
in parlance of our young students, this is when we're texting back and forth. Interested. So this is FDR
But then,
meeting
but
Churchill in the
eventually
battleship.
they meet IRL
Oh yeah, we're gonna meet IRL.
in the middle of the Atlantic. So that's
Oh no, this is a friend that we've seen in class and we've hung out with before, but now we're texting on the side
yeah,
now. It's go we've dropped into their DMs. I'm really trying hard.
yeah, you
This
are.
is so sad. Uh, and like half the people are like, I'm done. This
Yeah,
is I can't stand this. So in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a boat, there's a hole. There's a hole in the bottom of the sea. There's FDR and Winston Churchill, and they are describing how they are going to carve up Europe and what the situation is going to be, and how to avoid World War III before we've even kickstarted.
and don't forget, FDR agrees to a Germany first policy, regardless of how the
Explain the
U.
Germany first policy.
Regardless of however the U.S. gets involved in World War II, Germany is the first problem that has to be addressed.
There you go. So we've learned. Here's the thing: Hitler, Mussolini, they learned how to fight the war from World War One. They learned that if you stop moving, you start dying. What um, what FDR and Churchill learned from World War One is you got to go in knowing what success is going to look like.
And that's what the Atlantic Charter sets up.
That's what the Atlantic Charter sets up.
You still have to win the battles, but they now have at least an outline and how they want to do it. And from the American perspective, it does set up this idea that at least FDR knows we're going to have to fight a two-front war.
Yep.
That if something happens in Asia, we're going to have to be involved in there as well. In theory, the British should be as well because they're the
Oh,
biggest stockholders in Asia, if I can use that.
yes.
But
Well, we are. It is a stockholder.
yeah,
It really is. It's interest. It's vested interest. So I'm gonna do what we. I want to make sure that we don't do what we did last time. We forgot about Japan. Let's not forget about Japan at all during this. America knows that because Japan is part of the Axis powers. We've gotten our three strikes, right? We've pulled back
yes.
selling them as much as we used to, and they're going to get mad about that. So we have to understand this. America is going to be supplying 30 different countries. We're going to be supplying our own selves for war. My argument, my other question before we started was, what was it really about? And World War II, in my perspective, once again, socioeconomics historian, is about the power of using one's resources. And America is so resource rich. We can have the Atlantic Charter because we know it is inevitable that we're going to win.
I'll make this argument just slightly. We don't like those types of wars in the United States. We need wars for causes and for reasons. Remember the Alamo. Remember the
Oh,
Spain.
yeah.
Remember the Maine.
Remember the Maine.
Right. We like those socioeconomic reasons. That's a European reason for war. The Euros are comfortable with that. They've been doing that for thousands of years. That's a concept in the United States that we kind of look at our modern takes on stuff, right? Why
We're
are we in the
going
Middle
after
East?
terrorism.
Right.
We're
And the underlying
spreading-
thing is it's also where the oil is. Right. Well, we can't
We're
say that
spreading
because
democracy.
we don't, but we don't like that economic reason for war. So we got to find some other reasons. And my argument was the U.S. has to find another reason to get into this war
And the Japanese happily provide that for
because
us.
they've been planning it for years.
Oh yeah.
Right.
But let's be pragmatic about this. Using our word from last time, pragmatic. Socioeconomically, this is a resource war.
Oh no, I agree totally. We just don't like it as a public
Well, you can't-
country.
That's not a video game right there. You can't play.
That's
Oh yeah, I'm gonna save these resources.
It might be in Europe though because they've been doing it forever.
They didn't have
But
anything.
going back, let's not forget about Japan. Remember, we have the Flying Tigers. No, it's not just the Air Force ROTC here on campus, right? We've basically supplied a private air force to the nation of China to fight the Japanese, starting back in 38. So we've already had that going,
Ah,
right? So we can see it happening.
we were in the run up to it as well. We had the Lincoln Brigade in
The Spanish American
in
War.
the Spanish American not
Right.
Spanish American War.
Oh,
The Spanish Civil War.
Excuse me, thank you.
Spanish
Civil War.
Civil War is going to be where Generalissimo Franco is Francisco Franco, so Frankie Frank. Frankie Frank is going to be with his new best buds, the fascists in Italy and Germany, and Hitler's going to get a chance to practice blitzkrieg.
Yeah, he
That's
tries out all his new war
Guernica.
toys.
That's bombing the city. That's Picasso painting the horrible Guernica mural.
It's paratroopers. It's the first
Yeah.
time he uses paratroopers.
Which you gotta love the idea that humans are amazing. all right, so guys, we got this big old thing. We're going to tie it to the back of your back, and you're going to jump out of a plane. And someone was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I do love human beings. We're so phenomenal about that. So that's happened. We've had our run throughs. We've had our dress rehearsals. And like you said, now we're getting ready for the big
No, yeah,
big
fine.
fight. That's
Right.
Lend-Lease Act. So let's look at Lend-Lease Act. Let's look at the conscription bill. Talk to me about Lend-Lease.
Lend lease is this idea that we're going to lend it to you and you can pay us back later. Right? You don't have
Yeah.
to pay us back right away. You don't have to have the
What you
money up
can
front.
when you can.
Once you can, when you can, and some of that lend lease stuff isn't paid back until the '90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, I got a
Right.
check the other day. It was weird.
It's awesome,
So,
right? But
uh,
it was in Deutschmark, so it's not worth anything.
oh,
So you have this U.S. government getting involved, and we're only selling it to our allies now. We've picked a side.
this is not the first time we've done this. We did that in World War One as well. We dropped our trade to the Central Powers
Yeah.
precipitously, and we went up exponentially with the Allies. So this is nothing new. This
No.
is this is how America shows you. This is America giving you the hint to ask us out.
Yes.
This is how America shows interest. We're only selling to you, baby.
Yeah.
Also, we're going to start getting soldiers. Talk to me about the conscription bill.
Just slipped through Congress. Nobody paid much attention to it. Right in the United States, the president just can't say, "Hey, we're drafting people tomorrow." It has to be a law. It has to be approved, and they start a draft. Conscription is the big fancy word for a draft, and they start it before the U.S. is even involved. Again, people can see this coming. What's the event that gets the U.S. involved? We all know it's going to be Pearl Harbor. Europe's already started. Germany invades Poland in September 1939,
39.
right? 1939. So you have that going, but then they took some time off. They call it a winter timeout because they don't really come back in until.
What is up with Germany and calling timeout during war?
Well, no, what's up with France letting them do it,
Well, it's France.
right?
They have the
Or-
Maginot Line. They're like, whoa, 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 we've got a big new trench.
Yeah.
Why aren't we all playing trench? We just bought trench.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's still like started playing Zelda, and you're like, but I just got Mario.
Yeah. So war kicks off, and now we need these turning points because turning points in the war is where they decide that he eventually is going to win the war, wins their first battle, gets in charge of it. And we have our pictures here.
So let's talk about Dunkirk. Dunkirk is the battle at the bottom center. Dunkirk, go watch the movie. But it was a great movie.
Yeah.
Dunkirk is a miracle. They call it the miracle at Dunkirk.
Yeah, because it's getting the British troops off the continent.
It's getting what, 300,000?
Yeah.
300,000 British troops. And we're talking British naval planes. Churchill finest hour. It wasn't finest hour.
No, that's not the finest hour. That's better.
No, it is finest hour. It is finest hour. It's talking about getting them out of Dunkirk. That's
Yeah,
that-
because all the private boats that went and picked
we're
everybody
talking civilian fish boats, yachts,
up. Right.
luxury yachts.
That saves Britain. A lot of historians argue says getting the troops out of Dunkirk is what saves Britain from getting invaded later on down the line because the men are there. They're no longer on the continent. They're not wiped out on the continent.
And it was
Right.
not easy. It was unbelievably
No, it's
dangerous as a civilian or anything because the Germans were like, okay, if you pick up a soldier, you're in.
Yeah.
You're tagged into the war.
Yeah, because you're doing an act of war.
So Dunkirk calls for unbelievable organization of civilians and military, and that's how you know this is going to already be a total war.
And from the British perspective, this is what emboldens the British people. This is how they're going to survive the bombings. This is how they're going to be able to live down in the tube and allow Churchill to
the
make
tube is their
those,
subway.
yeah, to make those speeches that just keeps rallying his people
Oh yeah, we'll
over
fight
and
on
over
the
again because
beaches.
it's already proved that the private citizens the are going to be willing to help, right, to do whatever they need to do.
Make no mistake, the British were decimated, almost like just devastated by this stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I asked my students, it was like, we're talking about the problems with Ukraine and stuff like that. If we always, if we go to war with Russia, it's like, well, it's not, nowadays, we can't expect the same war that we've always had, which is elsewhere. It will be a war on our turf. And the Brits are stalwart, walking past unexploded bombs, all that kind of stuff. But
Well,
we got to have that propaganda too. That keep
Oh,
calm,
and
carry on.
this plays into it, right?
Absolutely,
So
stiff upper lip, keep it
so
going.
you have that from a British perspective to keep them going until the Americans get involved. The Americans get involved, and the first place is North Africa, right? And let's face
Which
it,
seems weird, right?
no, it's about oil.
Oh, no,
It's
it's all
always going
about
to be about
oil.
oil, right? It's going to be the Germans want the oil, the British want to control the oil, want to keep control of Suez. We have the issue. So you have the Battle of El Alamein, right?
That's the top one, guys. Top
Where
middle.
where the Allies hold off the German advance, get the Germans to start retreating, able to take the rest of North Africa after that. Big turning point because it allows for two major conferences to take place. One in Casablanca, and then another one a year later in Tehran. Right? Casablanca, they're going to start talking about a European campaign. This is where the idea of coming in through Sicily and Italy come into play.
Soft underbelly of
Right?
Europe. That's the idea.
And then Tehran, one is to kind of talk about what's going to be the D-Day invasion, but two, they're already talking about post World War II and the oil in the Middle East, right? How that's
Oh yeah.
going to be protected, who's going to be looking at it, and by the time Tehran rolls around, not only is it the U.S. and the British, it's also Uncle Joe Stalin and the Soviets are at that meeting as well, and they want a piece of that oil pile too.
Because now Hitler has pushed against them,
Yeah,
and now they're on our side, the enemy of my enemy.
yeah,
And here's the problem, though, because Tehran sets up the understanding that Middle Eastern oil is going to be for us as well. It's a
yes.
resource war. This is going to cause problems later on because we're going to make some deals and move some people around because we want that oil.
Yep. Both
Because
sides are going to do it. No,
both
not just
sides,
the
yeah,
U.S.
both, yeah.
The Soviets get involved with some of that.
We're all going to
shenanigans,
do it. We're all going to do it, and that's going to set up problems further down the road, which we'll talk about later. But the idea that oil as a resource has gone from being kind of a new novelty thing for motor cars to being the lifeblood of an army. When we talk about this, El Alamein, when we talk about the defeat at El Alamein for the Nazis, and the Germans are now on a time clock. They are on a
Yeah,
they
it's the
are they
first
are
time they've
fighting a
been forced to
losing war.
retreat.
They are it's not even it's forced to retreat, but also the fact that now we're running on oil reserves.
Mhm.
We've got left. When we stop the Japanese advance to the Coral Sea, when we stop giving them oil, they have a certain number of years of oil left.
And
Everything now has a timer.
and that's what makes the photo on the left so important about Midway, where literally as it sounds, midway between the Asian continent and the North American continent is this
Mhm.
little island of Midway, strategically important, always been a refueling stop
Mhm.
uh, in the 1800s. Japan desperately wants to get its hands on it. The United States was able to break the Japanese code, knew exactly when they were showing up, what they were bringing, what side of the island they were going to attack from, and the U.S. is just basically waiting on the other side of the island for when they come around, they can catch them. They can surround them all around and
And that's going to be a big
turn the
thing.
war.
That's going to be a big thing that goes on past this war is the understanding of tapping communications and understanding communications. And that's going to boost us to where we are in our communications technology is this idea of using it to transport, encrypt, and decrypt
Well,
communications.
yeah, you go from using literally carrier pigeons in World War One
Mm-hmm.
to you know almost wireless communication now
Yeah,
during wars.
unbelievable
Yeah,
radio communications.
yes,
Something
the
out.
invention of sonar.
Computers.
Yeah, yeah, IBM and all those start happening during the war, right?
They're
So
used to break the Enigma code.
right.
That's
So,
Alan
so,
Turing.
so you have that whole big play here, but you got the turn. So we got the turn in North Africa, we got the turn in the Pacific. We got two big conferences out of the way, basically setting up what's going to happen on the continent.
Yeah,
Because eventually the United States has to arrive on the European continent.
it's got to be. They got to liberate it. We got
And
to
it's,
take it
it's
out.
got to be liberated. It's got to be clean. The Soviets have been calling for it, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need something on the Western Front, right? We can't keep holding the East. And I would argue for the longest time they didn't hold the East until they had to hold the East
Mm-hmm.
at their three biggest cities. They still practiced scorched earth. They still retreated and burned everything until they got to their three biggest cities. And at
If it
that
ain't
point,
broke,
they had to fight.
well, with scorched earth, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it ain't broke,
Well,
burn it down.
it is kind of broke because Hitler figured out how to break it until they lose in North Africa.
And then it's just
Because
okay.
then all of a sudden you've lost your oil. Now your supply lines that you had running are running out of fuel.
Yeah.
They don't work as much. So you can hold you can hold Leningrad for 900 days. You can give you the order at Stalingrad that if our men are retreating, you shoot them. So
Yep.
take your choice. Do you want to be shot by the Germans, or do you want to be shot by your countrymen?
So yeah, so we've got Midway. That's the turning point. We've got El Alamein. So now we've got them cornered in Europe. The deal is we invade Normandy. Russia is going to help us clean up the Japanese.
Yes, that's the understanding that gets laid out beginning in Tehran and then continues at the Alta Conference, right?
And there we have the Yalta Conference, which is we promise we will get in. We're going to help you, but you've got to give us help in the Pacific.
Yeah.
And the Russian and Soviets are like, sure.
Yeah, we're going to divide. This is where they divide Germany, they divide Berlin at Yalta, and the Russians, the Soviets promise that eventually they'll jump in the Pacific at some point, right? Because for the most part, it's the U.S. in the Pacific, and the Australians, right?
Yep.
The Australians are down at the U.S. base is actually in Darwin when they're forced to leave the Philippines. They go to Darwin, Australia. So you get that little British enclave with the Australians. The British are desperate to hang on to Hong Kong. But it's mostly the U.S. doing the great majority of the Pacific. So we're looking for an ally, and the ally we think would have been the Soviets because they have this history against the Japanese,
Russo-Japanese
right?
War.
That they would want to be part of, and that really never materializes from it. So you get this start of not only the end of World War II, but the start of the new Cold War that's going to happen.
So Russia's not going to push back in Asia because they are seeing the development of a chance of having a communist ally in China, and that's what they're going to see. Because Mao and Chiang Kai-shek are going to fight against the Japanese at first. They're best friends.
It's very weird. China fights itself, and then Japan invades, and they go, "Okay, time out, tag team action. We're gonna tang up against you."
It's WWE.
It's the
literally
WWE,
is.
right? Well, no, right? Mao turns babyface, right? Joins Shang. They join the U.S.
And
Kick
here's
the
the thing.
Japanese out, and then they're like, okay,
Chiang Kai-shek turns heel.
yeah, and Shang turns heel and turns against Mao, and away we go.
Chiang
Right?
Kai-shek will turn on them and be like, okay, now we're going to kill you. And the communists are like, what?
Yeah. So you have that issue happening there,
But that's why Joseph's not going to pursue
and
it.
that's why, because Stalin thinks he's going to
Okay.
get a new political ally. Little does he know the Chinese version of communism is completely different than his Soviet
Marxist-Leninism.
Marxist-Leninism version of communism there, and they don't like each other either. But that's a story for a different day.
So that's the Alta Conference wherein we are getting that promise. And at this point in the Alta Conference, does the Soviets have an inkling that we're working on the bomb? I mean, everyone's working on the bomb.
Everybody's working on it. I would say
We're all working on the bomb. The stuff's there. The intelligence.
I would say if they didn't, then they're not doing their due diligence because you're supposed to spy on your allies anyways, right?
Yes.
So they should know what's happening. Whether Churchill, Roosevelt, Stalin are secretly talking about it, like telling them how far
We'd have to
advanced
be a
we
fly on the
are,
wall.
we know that historically history will tell us the Soviets are at least 4 years behind getting their version of the bomb after the United States. So how far advanced they are, we're not exactly sure. Are they just relying it on the United States? Is it one of those where they're just hoping that the U.S. gets it before the Germans get it? Because Oppenheimer, has that moral conundrum that I don't think this is a good thing to build, but if we don't build it,
Someone else
they're
will.
definitely going to, and they're going to use
Other
it a lot
people are
worse than we're
testing
going to.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that other people are testing theirs. So okay, so Yalta Conference, who's in attendance? Do we still have FDR?
It's FDR, it's Churchill, it's Stalin. FDR is very frail looking. If you see pictures of him at the
He's getting close to his death.
Yeah, he's always in the middle of Churchill and Stalin because Churchill and Stalin can't stand each other. So Roosevelt's kind of the mediator in between. But you have them. They also divide up Germany here. They divide Berlin here. So again, this is the footprint of the Cold War as well at Yalta.
And that's also going to be a problem when FDR does die. Does that agreement still stand in Uncle Joe's eyes? Because we're racing at the end. We're not racing the Germans to Berlin. We're racing the Soviets.
Yeah, we're racing each other to Berlin, right? Where we're trying to see who can get to Berlin first, who can get to what landmark first, and slowing down the United States and the British is the Battle of the Bulge.
Yep.
That's what slows down the United
And
States.
that's why it's such a pain in the butt. Battle of the Bulge probably should not have happened, but it does,
But it's
and it
because
causes
Hitler sees the U.S. and the British as more of a problem than the Soviets. Even in the dying end of the war,
man,
they still don't see the Soviets as a big issue. And you can go back to the fact that it's the Hitler Youth protecting Berlin from the Soviet troops and
it's
not
Boy
regular
Scouts.
troops. Yeah.
It's 12.
It's 12 year
Jojo
olds.
Rabbit. It's the
Yeah.
movie Jojo Rabbit. All these little kids running around with rocket launchers.
Yes.
I mean, the problem becomes that once again they don't have the benefit of hindsight that we do. Um, this is a mis- it's a lack of knowing where to put the priorities and so that where to put your resources. Once again, resources is a huge part of this. So we get the Normandy invasion post Yalta, right? Or pre
No,
Yalta?
pre-Yalta.
Sorry, pre Yalta.
Pre-Yalta.
So we have
You can't have
sorry,
Yalta without Normandy.
again
Because Yalta, remember, is
that
in the Soviet Union, but you got to be able to control European airspace to
so that we can get our men there.
Churchill and Roosevelt there.
So Normandy happens. That's the turning point. Now it's a pushback effort. Yalta is there. Now we're just already starting to divide up the spoils. FDR kicks it. FDR
Probably
dies.
has a couple mini strokes on the boat ride back to the United
Highly
States,
possible.
and then has a massive one when he's down in Georgia
And
at his
dies.
retreat.
And dies. It's a lot of stress on the man.
Yeah.
So here's the trick. Harry Truman comes in. And what I love that story is FDR didn't like Truman. FDR doesn't.
Truman knows nothing.
Truman knows nothing about the bomb. Here's the thing that's psychotic. Hey, Mr. Truman, the president has died. I'm gonna need you to put your hand on this book. Uh, guess what? Congratulations, Mr. President. Also, fun fact: we have a bomb that can destroy an entire city.
Yeah.
And now Harry, the buck stops here. Truman is stuck with the concept of, do I use this weapon? Spoiler alert: he does.
But he gives Japan an out first.
Let's talk about that. Let's
He
make sure we
writes them
explain
a
that.
letter basically saying, "We've made it. It works. You know what we got. Don't make us use it." Now, obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but it's essentially the crux of the letter because everybody knows that the U.S. and Germany are working on it. He basically lets the Japanese know we've done it. We've tested it. It works.
We have a
Don't
bunch.
force our hand. And
We have a bunch. We have 1,000 of them
Yeah.
ready to go.
Don't force our hand.
So that's the thing, and it's really good that we got it, not the Germans, because the Germans had intercontinental ballistic missile technology. They've got von Braun, they've got the V2 rockets. They have the capability of launching these suckers. And it's
Yeah,
scary.
they
scary
did a
thing.
little backwards because they got the rocket
Yeah.
technology first before they got the nuclear things. But yes,
Once
idea,
again, where do you put your
yeah,
resources?
the idea of but quick side, von Braun, that's what von Braun wants to do. Von Braun wants to go to space. He doesn't want to build weapons of war. He wants to go to space. So if this is what I have to do to continue my research. I'm sorry, sorry, not sorry. I got to do it.
1936, Werner von Braun is asked to see how far they could go with this rocket technology. He comes up with the moon base.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you give a lot of scientists a lot of money. That's why he comes to Houston. He wants to do the rockets to get us to the moon. 1953, on the Wide World of Disney, Werner von Braun, Nazi scientist, is on is on Wild World of Disney. He's showing the city of the future, which is Epcot Center. So we dropped the bomb,
We dropped the bomb and then we dropped a second one 3 days later.
and we hope to God that
That's all we got to do because it's all we got. The big argument historically has always been why drop the second one so quickly after the first one, because it's not a lot of time to survey
3
any
days.
damage, right? So that's always been this is that the true start of the Cold War, letting the Soviets know that we're not afraid to use this
multiple
times. I was going to say indiscriminately, but we do have at least viable targets militarily with the two in Japan.
Which leads us to the last conference at Potsdam.
Yeah.
We got a minute left, minute to win it. Potsdam.
Truman realizes that Stalin's a big old jerk, and the conflict is on between the United States and Soviet Union.
We
And
have
we
the
understand
bomb.
that Stalin's
They
not
do
gonna keep his word.
We know that they have not helped us out as they promised they would at the Alta conference. They know that we have the bomb. It has become our ally. Was never really been a great ally. Has now become our biggest antagonist, and Churchill is in it. Right, and Churchill's not even there, is he?
No, it's the new guy. It's the new because the war's over, so the British only want him as wartime prime minister.
And they take him away, and we got this new guy whose name I don't even remember.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Some guy, but it's all of this, and we realize now that our war has just started,
Yes,
and that's
we
the
got a new
scariest
type of
part.
war coming.
And it's once again World War One, new type of war. World War Two, new type of war, and now the scariest war of all,
The Cold War.
the war that can end all war, the war that can truly end all wars. All right. Thanks for being with us.